And, I told them from day one, guys, year 3 for me at Temple and Baylor was championship caliber years. I expect us to build to get to year 3 and do that. It's no promise that it will happen, but the way the guys have worked, I think their belief it's been really high.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. Today is Monday, June 16th, and we appreciate those of you checking out the show today. We have done an awesome job with the support that you guys have given us here over the last few months. The offseason has flown by. We're just a few weeks away from media days with the Big 12 getting kicked off there at the beginning of July. And we also know, too, that now is a great time to visit with coaches. We've had so many great coaches that have joined the show talking about their team, talking about big picture items. And today will be no different. We will have Matt Rhule of the Nebraska Cornhuskers joining us here today. I always love visiting with Coach. We have a great relationship. I like their team a lot this year. I really do. I think there's a lot to like with what returns. I love that they've now gone with Dana Holgorsen offensively. We'll ask him about that, and we'll ask him a little bit, too, about big picture college football. I mean, he's a guy that's been a head coach in the NFL. So even if you're not a Nebraska fan, you might be interested to hear some of the things that Matt Rhule has to say about where we're at in the sport and how the sport is continuing to look maybe a little bit more like the way the NFL teams are run on a year-to-year basis. We also are going to dive into the mailbag. We've gotten a lot of great questions. You can always submit those questions to our social media at AlwaysCFB. Anytime you have a question, just go ahead and submit it there. You can also submit it to me at Greg McElroy on Twitter or on X, and then on Instagram as well. And if you're here with us via the ESPN College Football YouTube page, put some questions in those comment section. We'll get to those at a future date on the show. Maybe we might even just answer them right there on the comment section. So we really very much appreciate the support you've shown. We've grown like crazy. It's been our best offseason by a mile, and we look forward to continued growth as we get closer and closer to the college football season officially getting underway. But let's kick things off today with a great conversation with Matt Rhule. He's the head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. He's Matt Rhule. Coach, you've done such a great job in just building over the last few years. And I know last year there were some great moments. There were some moments you were disappointed in. But all in all, if we're going to sum up just what was accomplished last year, how would you sum things up?
I think that the biggest thing was just kind of proof of concept. Like, for the guys that were there, to come down the stretch, to get that big win over Wisconsin, which, it's been 12 years, I think, since we last beat Wisconsin. To beat Wisconsin in convincing fashion, to have some guys and coaches kind of go in the portal and leave, and the guys that really want to be here stick around and go to the bowl game and win. What we ask guys to do is really hard. You don't get a lot of results. It can be difficult to keep working so hard. I think getting that win and getting that bowl win, it was like, hey, I can see it. And then, if I may, Greg, some of our guys going to the combine, going to the Senior Bowl, and then coming back and telling our guys, hey, I know it seems crazy the coach wants you to take a note in every meeting with a pen and a pad. I know it seems maybe crazy that he wants you to be on time, finish drills this way, but it gives you an advantage in that process. So I think there was kind of proof of concept to our own guys and maybe some confidence from that.
It's so funny how often we in the media, and frankly, I can't even say we, but I do feel like the media in general has kind of watered down bowl games with the way that people talk about them, how, well, the postseason, it's not what it once was. Fine. Okay, so maybe the bowl season that you and I grew up with is different than the bowl season now. But for a program that had been starved for that postseason appearance to get that victory, am I crazy to think that there's some great momentum that can be created off that win? How have you experienced it so far?
Yeah, I think going back to Temple and then going back to Baylor, the one thing that I knew, and so I said it to our guys, I always felt like it was the first game of the next year.
Yeah.
Now with the portal and some of those things, it even more so is. But I mean, football's a game of competition. We spend a lot of time. We even have a committee determining who goes to the playoffs. We're the only sport that's really kind of like that. In terms of for our national champion. So you try to say, well, this team's better than that team's better than this team, but it's a game of competition. It's a game of achievement. The two teams go out there, and it's not the better team, it's the team that plays the best. And so I think being a part of that bowl game, going out and competing, Yankee Stadium was amazing. New York City, for a lot of kids that have never been to New York City was amazing. I think bowls are awesome. I mean, I watch every single one that I can because I love watching people compete and play the game that I love.
Yeah, I think you and I are in the same boat there. Call me a junkie, fine. I wear that badge proudly. I watch every bowl game. I don't care when they are, what time they start. I'm watching because I know there's just at that point a few more games left for me to consume before a very long off season. And look, this off season's been an exciting one for you guys so far. A lot of guys back from last year trying to take a big step forward, but a lot of guys that are new too, some new faces that should be playing some pivotal roles. How would you kind of sum up how spring went and where you stand here in June?
I think we've had an excellent spring. I couldn't be more satisfied with where the guys are. You know, usually as a coach, you're like, yeah, but I love what we've done. I love the moves that we've made in terms of the games, the way the guys have worked. And, gave them a little bit of time off in May. They were back early in June. And I went down there today. I mean, I think we're working with purpose, intentionality. I see a team that really all supports each other. And we're bigger, faster, stronger. We've got guys at every position that can win in the Big Ten. And so, these first 2 years, they've been about, people say building a culture, but you also have to get the football right. You've got to get the guys who can go make those plays and develop them, and I think we're right there.
It's amazing, too. And I wonder for a program like you, Coach, at Nebraska, to see what transpired in Indiana last year, to think we're not that far away from the penthouse. Nobody is anymore. It's like kind of amazing. You can go from the outhouse to the penthouse and vice versa. We've seen it go in the other direction as well. So last year, seeing some teams break through that had not broken through, the SMUs, the Indianas, does that maybe allow for a little bit bigger of a carrot, a little bit more realistic of a carrot that you could put in front of the guys and say, hey, guys, we can do that too if you just follow me and listen to me? Have you noticed any type of response from your team in that regard?
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily Indiana. I mean, they're a unique thing. They brought a lot of their team. It was a championship caliber team. I think the thing that Indiana did last year was they spoke to the value of production and performance over potential. Not all 5-star kids came out of high school, but guys that were veteran, that were older, that were committed to the team and the process. Credit to them. I think the biggest thing for us is our guys knew that we could hang in there against Ohio State. We came down to a couple plays at the end where we could win the game. Maybe we could go out there and beat Colorado convincingly. And so we've been in a race for consistency. When you're playing young players, young people aren't always consistent. But I think they saw the importance of that. And I told them from day one, guys, year 3 for me at Temple and Baylor was championship caliber years. I expect us to build to get to year 3 and do that. It's no promise that it will happen, but the way the guys have worked, I think their belief has been really high. And we didn't solve our problems this year through the portal. We got better in the portal. We're solving our problems on the practice field and getting better at football. And I think the guys are finally bought into, hey, you know what? You have to go practice really hard, train really hard to have a chance to win.
Well, you brought up year 3. I wasn't going to. But there's been this media narrative about this Matt Rhule magic in year 3. And you referenced the success at both Temple and Baylor and that significant breakthrough. Why is it that year 3 in your first 2 stops, why is it that was the year that seemingly all the things kind of lined up and you were able to make a run? How do you sum that up?
Well, I mean, I look at some of my really good friends in coaching. Ryan Day and I were young assistants together at Temple. Dan Lanning, those guys were smart, man. They took over really good jobs, teams that were winning at a high level, playing for national championships, and then they've just, continued to do so. I've never done that, and it's, I wasn't that hot name, so I took over teams in my career that were not winning. I took over teams that were losing, and I think when you're losing, you have to first, eliminate the things that cause you to lose, and that takes time. That takes patience. That takes you being willing to sacrifice winning to set a standard. I played young guys at Temple. I played young guys at Baylor. In the year 2, you kind of go through what we went. The highs and lows, the ups and downs. You begin to see what you're capable of, but we still have a culture of inconsistency. And then you get to year 3, and you're hoping that the players have had enough. They've seen the progress that doing it our way makes, and instead of fighting it, they buy into it. they relinquish, all the things that held us back, and then you go play for championships. And so I only think it takes 3 years, because of where the program was. It wasn't in a great spot here, and I think we're in a much better spot now.
Well, there's no denying that the progress made last year in so many areas was just so obvious, particularly at quarterback. And look, Dylan, it's obvious. You watch him for 5 seconds, you're like, all right, he's gifted. He's got a natural ability to deliver the football. He's got an effortless throwing release. Just his motion, his feel, his instincts are all way above the level that you would expect from a true freshman quarterback. How have you seen him grow this offseason?
Well, he's always been a tremendous worker. I think, when you're a young player, you can be emotional, and when things are great, you're great. When things get bad, sometimes you get, you kind of get quiet, you get, introverted, you start to get frustrated. And he and I sat together in the cafeteria today. We actually had this exact conversation. They had the UCLA game on TV, and he was like, "Man, it was 13-7 at the half." And then we came out. We threw a pick six. He threw a pick six, and we talked about how far he's come. To me, it's not about his highs being any higher. It's about his lows not being so low. It's the same for our whole team. And so, what I've loved about Dylan is the consistency that he's got bought into. He's the same guy every day. He's holding people accountable, starting with himself. His body looks great, and he and Dana Holgorsen, I think, are going to make a dynamic duo. I think we have a chance to be really, really, really special on offense.
Well, it's amazing. You're leading the questionnaire here, because that was the next question. Look, I've known Dana forever, dating back to my time being recruited by Texas Tech. He's one of my favorites. Like, he's a guy that I not only want to talk ball with, but I want to go and hang out with. There's no one more fun, assuming there's a case of Red Bull available. But it's really amazing the energy he brings to the game. And look, he's been a head coach for a long time. But in talking to the guys that have gone from the head coaching role back to the coordinator role, there's like this newfound enthusiasm that they've all felt. I've talked about it with Gus Malzahn, talked about Chip Kelly, talked about it with a handful of others that have made that switch. Now that he's back calling plays for you guys, how have you noticed a difference in the way he's approached the game, and maybe the kind of new lease on life he seems to have?
Well, you go back and look at his time at Houston. He was unbelievably successful. And that last year they made whatever decision they made. But I think he's a genius, and he's a perfect fit for me because I can be kind of conservative, and he obviously is not, and I need that from someone I respect to kind of take the reins and go. But it seems like he's enjoyed it. It seems like, he's certainly someone I lean on. He's certainly someone who gives me tons of, feedback and suggestions and ideas. But at the end of the day, I think he really enjoys being around the players. Each of us got into coaching originally just because we loved being in the locker room. We loved coaching the guys. And as you have more and more success, you get put into positions like this where, you're pulled away from it. It's still the best part of your day. But being the head coach is about a lot of other things. And so for him to get back out there with the guys, to be in the meeting room with the guys, to call plays, design plays, it's what makes him unbelievably special. And it seems to me like he's having one of the best times of his life.
I love hearing that. I'm happy for him. What a great destination. I love the marriage that you guys have now between head coach and offensive coordinator. The only problem with Dana is, like, looking at it from a air raid perspective, he still runs it too much. That's fine. Balance is fine nowadays in college football, but I know Coach Leach kicked him out of the air raid tree because he was too little too run heavy. You have a comment on that?
We played the bowl game. We ended it with like 22 personnel YY power on 4th and 2. And at the end of the game, I said, "Hey, have you ever run two-back power more than mesh in your life? This many times that you ran it." But that's what I love about Dana. I just think he's a football genius. The devil's in the details with him. I think people see him, like you said, the Red Bull on the sidelines. I think he's just kind of this wild kid. What they don't know is he's in here all day with his staff, and he's with the guys, and he's a teacher, he's a developer, and he values execution over a potential. I think not a lot of guys do that, but he has the courage to do that.
I'm excited for him, that's for sure. I am also excited about your weaponry. I thought it was solid last year, but Dane Key, for example, like, he's one of those guys that I've just had my eye on for a long time. I think he's painfully underrated on the national level, But if you look at what he had to, it was just ridiculously productive in the opportunities he got. And granted, there were times when they were few and far between, but I'm really excited about seeing him in this offense and some of the other weapons that you have around him. So looking at Dylan's supporting cast, how do you feel about the progress made in those spots?
Well, I think we're in an unbelievable place. As you said, Dane came in. He's accomplished. He's a professional. He gives us a big body who can run, great catch radius, really tough. And Isaiah Hunter on the other side came in, from Cal. Same sort of a thing. He's like a tailback playing receiver, which I love. Can run after the catch. Corey Barney coming back last year as a true freshman, broke records here. He's going to be one of the most dynamic, receivers and punt returners in football. Emmett Johnson really came into his own once Dana took over because he can catch the ball in the backfield, run your option routes, protect and run the football. Tight end Luke Lindemeyer, our former quarterback Heinrich Harburg moves over there. We have a ton more. We have a ton more of guys that we know can play in the Big Ten and win. And so Dylan's going to have a lot of people to hit the ball too. And I will never neglect the fact that I think we're going to have an outstanding offensive line, a group of guys that have come a long way, really making themselves the weight room. So I think we'll be big enough and physical enough to run it and explosive enough to create mismatches and big plays in the passing game.
I'm sure you will be. I look forward to seeing that group. I think collectively across the board, it's going to be rock solid. Defensively, some new voices. I know you've gone out and had to make some new hires. I'm encouraged by kind of keeping the continuity that was created over the last couple of years under Tony White. But how do you anticipate the defense evolving now with some new eyes at some different positions and some new voices that'll be in the room?
Yeah, I think John obviously, spent the last 10 years before last year in the NFL. Had one of the best secondaries in football in Buffalo. So we'll continue to be the same team that we were. I mean, we were really multiple. We might be in 3 down, 4 down. Might get to a bare front. We like the pressure. We never want to just let the offense dictate to us, what they're going to be in. I think the biggest thing though is that if you want to get to the CFP and win in the CFP, you got to win the passing situations. You got to win third down. You have to win 2 minutes. So, lining up and just playing straight man, that's one way to do it. That's what we've been doing. I think also having the ability to, getting into coverage variations, getting into double mug, getting into some other unique fronts, really can challenge people in college football, and that's what John brings. So I think in many ways we will accelerate from a coaching perspective what we're doing defensively.
Certainly seems that way. And I know some of the variety that you guys showed last year. I know that you can continue to go deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. You have that variety with your personnel. Looking just kind of overall at where we're out in college football, so much been made of the House settlement. I'm not going to ask you about that. I'm not going to bore you with the semantics of the College Sports Commission, but I think you're uniquely qualified to be able to speak on behalf of all coaches when it comes to running an organization that is more and more becoming NFL-like, with general managers in those roles, with roster management, with roster turnover, managing recruiting, managing budgets, things of that nature. You've done it before at the highest possible level. So how is your experience in the NFL? How will that benefit you and Nebraska moving forward with the changes that we've seen here in college football?
Well, I think the biggest thing you learn when you're in the NFL is really valuation. Before, in college football, it's like, yeah, I think he's a player. Let's offer him. Let's take him. And you get to the NFL, they're all good players. It's just, hey, what's the financial value we're willing to put on this person and put on this position? And every year in the NFL, you go to free agency and you see teams walking away from really good players because of their contract situation. Now, there's differences. You can't carry money over. I think the smart teams in the NFL, they carry money over and they position things for great years. But that discipline, I think, is something that's really, really unique. It's hard because, you get to know the players. You want to take care of everybody. I think I brought in Pat Stewart from who spent a long time with the Eagles, Panthers, but also with the Patriots for most of his career. And having that set of eyes that's really disciplined, that's going to be the key. College football has been dominated by the haves who can aggregate all the good players, and hopefully a salary cap, if it holds, which I hope it does. Hopefully that will allow for more parity and let the best teams win.
It certainly seems like that's the direction we're heading. And I think more parity in the sport is healthy for sure. And the cream will rise to the top without question. Look, I do think that Nebraska is a place, and I think this is also, you're perfect to answer this question, with roster limits now at 105. And knowing that Nebraska has a long storied history of leaning into the walk-on program. How do you anticipate, just looking at it as a big picture, as a guy that's been a head coach at Temple and Baylor and Nebraska and in the NFL, how will roster limits impact the sport overall?
I think it's a really good question. I mean, you hope for, on the positive side, you're hoping that it pushes more really good players, into positions of success at the Group of Five level, FCS, Division II, Division III, and downward. Instead of sitting on the bench for 4 years at a school where you're not going to play, maybe they'll go somewhere and play. I don't love the roster limit. I think we're always looking for ways to create parity that aren't really, real. I mean, I would much rather just say, hey, this is the amount of guys that can dress on game day, but that was the rule. We're going to stick to it. I know people here in Nebraska, we don't love the fact that we can't carry the larger roster, which has been part and parcel of our culture, but we won't get rid of it altogether. We'll still take some walk-ons. It'll be maybe a little bit harder, but I hope that those kids that would have walked on here, now they're at the schools in the Dakotas, the FCS schools in the Midwest, and really elevate that level of football.
Yeah, I think we all hope that. It's disappointing, especially at a place like Nebraska that has such a well-documented history of success within their walk-on program. So I think at your place in particular, it's a little more gut-wrenching, just being completely honest. And I just hate that we have roster limits. I understand the rules, and like you said, let's find the positive and hope that it elevates other levels of football. Coach, we'll kind of get you out of here with this, that like the Big Ten's experienced massive turnover. A lot's been made about 4 automatic qualifiers. I'm not necessarily going to go down that rabbit hole, but I just look at the health of the league and the state of the league, and I always evaluate the league by how many teams can potentially win it. What's the parity like at the top? And for a while in the Big Ten, it's kind of been the top 2 or 3. It feels like that could change here in the next couple of years with the emergence of what you guys are doing, with what Penn State might have this year, with a few other programs that are always seemingly in the mix. How do you sense the top half of the Big Ten changing here in the next 3 or 4 years?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that there are more teams that are going to have a chance to play into it, and even when you think about the additions of Oregon and Washington, Oregon's kind of been in the they've been in the CFP. Washington played in the national championship game 2 years ago. You have Ohio State, you have Michigan, you have Penn State, you have Indiana that got in. I think one of the biggest things is the Big Ten has to continue to talk about, who and what it is. I mean, Illinois was 9-3 and beat an SEC team in the bowl game, I believe, and they were never even talked about. 9-3 teams in other conferences were, man, they should be in, but a 9-3 Illinois team didn't get that same credit, and I think it's because the Big Ten, we focused a lot on those top 2 or 3 teams the last couple of years, and deservedly so. But I think the new rev share, the House agreement, the opportunities. I think we're going to see more parity in the league, and I think that's what we need for college football to be healthy. We can't have it just be teams in the South and the Midwest. We need teams out west to be successful, teams in the Northeast to be successful. This has to be the nation of sport. I think the same thing within the conferences. So I know we're going to be there. I know Iowa's been there for years, having many great seasons. I know that we're going to be one of those teams that challenges in this league, and I'm sure there's lots of other people like in Indiana and Illinois that plan on doing the same. So I'm excited about the future of the Big Ten. I'm excited about where it's at for us. In being a national league and being right in the center, things like travel, little things like that. I think they play to our strengths, and we're going to try to make it run at the same.
Well, Coach, I obviously, just as an unbiased observer and consumer of college football, a long historical fan of college football, I'm rooting for Nebraska. You being there only elevates that fandom. So wanting the best for you, hoping for that year 3 Matt Rhule magic. Absolutely wishing you nothing but success throughout the course of the summer, the fall camp, and then ultimately in the season, man. I can't wait to watch your team play.
Thank you, my friend.
Great visit there with Matt Rhule. And I am being very honest when I say this. I think there's a lot to be excited about when surrounding Nebraska football right now. They have some momentum. I think they can maybe get over the hump a few times this year. And hopefully, we're all hoping for this. Let's just be real. College football's better with a healthy Nebraska. All right? That's all I have to say. Interpret that however you want. But if Nebraska football can somehow become a perennial contender again, that's good for all of us that are fans of the sport. We are now going to dive into our mailbag. And we always appreciate those of you that have contributed to the mailbag in the past. You can do so again in the future. Always CFB on our social media handles, Instagram, Twitter, what have you. Then you can also submit questions into the comment section on ESPN's college football YouTube page. So you pull up our video on the ESPN college football YouTube page. You can submit a question there. We'll get to it here at some point in the near future. But Coobs, let's kick it off. Where are we going first?
Oh, we got to start with Nebraska, right? So we're going to have Nikki in Charlotte. She asks, we know year 3 under Matt Rhule has been good at other spots. What do you consider a great year for Nebraska in 2025, knowing they have not won 10-plus games in a season since 2012?
Okay. The first thing that I want to see from Nebraska this season to really elevate is improvement offensively. Okay, that's number one. Now, I'm very, very excited about what Raiola might be this upcoming season. I think Dylan's got a chance to take a huge step. Oftentimes with quarterbacks, we see a huge leap from their true freshman season to their sophomore season. We also have seen it go the other way. We've seen a sophomore slump in some cases. So here's hoping for a big boost from the quarterback spot with the upgraded talent that I think they've made, and with the improvement that they now have from an offensive coordinator standpoint with Dana Holgorsen officially taking over. I think that group has a chance to score a lot of points because last year, guys, they were 103rd in the FBS in points per game. They scored under 24 points a game offensively. That's just not good enough. And then against Big Ten competition, they averaged just over 20 points a game. While I think their defense will continue to be good and maybe even in some cases great, it's going to be hard to envision double-digit wins unless we see significant growth on the offensive side of the football. Then number 2, it's pretty simple. You got to rise up and beat some of the best teams. It's been well documented what things look like for Nebraska when they play against ranked competition. By my count, they have lost 34 straight games against ranked teams. Granted, some of those are a little bit in flux because some teams are ranked in the coaches poll, some teams are ranked in the AP poll. So it doesn't always kind of materialize to where the rankings are always official. So let's just say they haven't beaten really, really good teams in a really, really long time. Yes, I remember in 2016 when they beat Oregon. That was significant. That Oregon team was legit and they beat them. But that, I think, was the last massive win that Nebraska's program has experienced. They lost last year to Michigan in convincing fashion. They gave Ohio State, the eventual national champions, they've given Ohio State plenty of scares at times. You look last year, a game against SC, they were ranked at the time. Didn't quite close that one out. You get a game against Penn State last year, didn't quite close that one out. You just look at their teams and just how they've fared in the biggest games against the best competition, and it just hasn't materialized. They've been close on several occasions. I cannot stress that enough. They've been very, very close, but they have to at some point get over the hump and win some of those close games as well. So I think those are the 2 keys for Nebraska. If they want to start knocking on the door of the college football playoff conversation, you want to start going out there and showcasing yourself against the best teams in the sport. Close doesn't count. You have to get those wins. And while they've had moments in which the ball was on their racket, only to see some miraculous bounce in the other direction, we've seen that happen too. It's time to start winning some of those games. They've done a pretty good job beating the teams they're supposed to beat. I mean, let's just be real. Yes, there have been some upsets like the UCLA game last year where they were a pretty heavy favorite and lost the game. Yes, they were a favorite against Illinois, lost the game. That Illinois team went on to be a really good football team, but if you look at Nebraska, there were some self-inflicted mistakes that happened in that game that just can't happen because you can't beat good teams by making big mistakes. So the next step for Nebraska are going toe-to-toe with the best teams in the country, not giving them a scare, not giving them a lot of pressure, but actually getting the win. And if they can do that, then Nebraska has a chance to be back squarely at the top of the conversation in the Big Ten, and then hopefully can kind of create a little bit more consistency in some of the biggest games on their schedule year in, year out.
All right, moving out west, we're going to hit Tim in Washington. And he asks, Washington was really good under DeBoer for the 2 years he was there, 25-3. But he left, and they finished 6-7 last year after joining the Big Ten. Are the Huskies doomed for mid-level Big Ten life for the foreseeable future?
No, I think this is a team that can absolutely get back. Now, when you lose your coach, and this is the case for Michigan last year, this is the case for Washington last year, this is the case for Arizona last year. Look at those three teams and how they underperformed. And if you want to include Alabama in that conversation, Alabama won 9 games. That would be considered by many to be a disappointing season for the Crimson Tide. Those teams that lost head coaches late in the process, there was a little bit of a trickle-down effect, and as a result, their rosters just lacked continuity, and in some cases, they lacked great depth at certain positions because of some of the turnover they experienced in the portal. So let's just take last year and kind of rip it off and just throw it away, because I don't think that's going to be the norm for Washington football here in the foreseeable future. I look at the starting point. Reason number one for optimism is their quarterback. Damon Williams has a chance, I think, to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten this year. And by season's end, assuming growth at the position, he could be one of the better players at the position in the entire country. That's a realistic possibility with what could go down. Now, if you look at the Sun Bowl performance, for example, and how he played in the postseason, that's a pretty great place to start. Louisville's a good football team, solid football team. He goes out and completes 26 of 32 for 374 and 4 touchdowns. So that, to me, kind of shows you what the potential looks like for Damon Williams down the road. And if you kind of just look at his numbers throughout the year, there was a lot of really positive moments. Now, is there areas where he can potentially grow? Yeah. I think that when you're a young player and you're tremendously athletic like he is, running around and your first instinct is to try to beat teams with your own athleticism. Well, that he can do that. We know that that's an established trait and one that every single defensive coordinator knows. Hey, when we're trying to defend this guy, his legs are a huge problem, and we have to always be mindful of him taking off and running and creating a big play. But the next step in the evolution of Williams is to, hey, I can beat him with my legs, but let me keep my eyes downfield. Don't commit to the run too soon, and then boom, I can tear you up with my arms as well, because so many big plays happen in scramble drill situations. So if he's out on the perimeter instead of just taking off and doing it himself, keep his eyes downfield, one of his receivers may pop open. Next thing you know, he got a big play touchdown or a big play created. So I think that is the area where I'd like to see some growth. But there's a reason why when you listen to Jedd Fisch, there's a reason why when you listen to those that are really familiar with the Washington program, they're all willingly putting this out there, saying this guy could be in New York as a Heisman Trophy candidate someday. Like, they believe in his upside that much. So if that can come to realization, then they could become a problem this year in the Big Ten. And when he's a year older, a year more mature, with another year starting under his belt, who knows what he might be as a junior and if he's still around as a senior and beyond. So that's number one. Number two, they have to be a lot better against the run defensively. If you look at where they were defensively, and just think long-term about Washington defense, right? Think back to, Coach Pete and Pete Kwiatkowski, their defensive coordinator. What were they one of the best in the country against? That was against the run. Well, that was not the case last year. Do you realize that they gave up over 4.7 yards per carry last year? That was second to last in the Big Ten. That was worse than pretty much everybody, with the exception of Purdue. So they were 17th. They gave up over 163 yards on the ground. They have now gone in. They've brought in Ryan Walters, former head coach of Purdue. He was really masterful with putting together an incredible defense at Illinois as the defensive coordinator a few years back. Didn't work out at Purdue, but now he's back calling plays defensively, installing a system defensively that is proven to be successful as a coordinator in his time in the Big Ten. So we'll see whether or not that group, they've added size along the defensive line. They've added bodies along the defensive line. So hopefully that group can be quite a bit better. Number 3, they got to be better along the offensive line. That was an issue throughout most of last season. Pass pros struggled. They weren't great as far as moving people off the ball. They added a bunch of new bodies, a bunch of new faces along the offensive line. So hopefully that can be a group that's significantly better. And then number 4, and last but certainly not least, they have to be able to win games away from home. Last year, they were 6-0 at home. They were 7-0 when they did not play in Seattle. Or 0-7, excuse me, when they did not play in Seattle. So to think just how stark the difference was between how they performed while at home versus how they performed in neutral site and or road environments, that's not replicable. They have to be able to take that show on the road. And if they can't, it'll be tough because of some of the hostile environments they're expected to see throughout their Big Ten schedule. So they got to win games away from home. They got to be better along the offensive line. They got to be better in run defense. And they got to hope that Demond Williams can take a massive step here in 2025, which I think is a very, very safe assumption given what he was able to do down the stretch last year.
0-7 away from Seattle. That's crazy. All right, moving over. Wow, didn't realize that. Josh in Roanoke. That's where we're going for our next one here. I want to believe in Brent Pry at Virginia Tech, but last year they were supposed to take a step up and finish 6-7. They have not won 10-plus games since the 2016 season. Can the Hokies ever get back to competing for ACC championships, or are they stuck in the middle of the ACC?
Well, 2 things that have to be done this year, and I still believe that Virginia Tech can be a player because the ACC, look, we know who the top teams are in the ACC that are going to be there annually. Clemson's always going to be there. Miami's always going to be there, right? Those to me are pretty safe assumptions, at least where those programs are at right now and where they're likely going under their head coaches and the support and the resources that they have access to. Those programs aren't going anywhere, but beyond that, there's a lot of questions. I think Louisville's going to be there almost annually, just based on how Jeff Brom's done it so far, how they've become a real destination in the portal, and just this unbelievable game planning that those players get every week because of how good their coaching staff is. It seems like they're always going to be in the mix. It does seem, at least in the near term, like SMU's not going anywhere. They have unbelievable resources. They have tremendous NIL support, so they're going to be around. But I do feel like last year might have overachieved a bit. Maybe they come back to earth just a little bit. Beyond that, man, it's kind of wide open. I mean, I'm still a believer in NC State. I continue to be a believer in Georgia Tech. I think Boston College under Bill O'Brien is going to be a pain to play every single week. So just looking at everything that's up for debate there in the ACC, there is some upward mobility. But their upward mobility this year will depend almost exclusively on how much better Kyron Drones can play. Now, there was some improvement at times, but based on the expectations in the preseason last year of what Kyron Drones was going to be, I would say he probably fell a little bit short of what those preseason expectations were. He had a 10-6 touchdown to interception ratio. That's just not going to cut it. He also was kind of middle tier in the low 50s when it comes to the QBR. That's not going to cut it. He's got to be a game changer. That moving forward with his skill set, with his talent level, he has to be a game changer. And if he can become that yet again, then Virginia Tech's going to have a real chance to make some noise this year, pull off some upsets, and potentially become a player in the ACC race. You also look to the ACC has become a conference that is very much dependent on high-level quarterback play. Syracuse won 10 games last year. Why? Because they had high-level quarterback play. Miami won 10 games last year. Why? Because they had high-level quarterback play. Clemson 2 years ago kind of struggled based on Clemson's expectations on an annual basis. Why? Because Cade Klubnik didn't have a great year in 2023, but he did in 24, and look at the results. Clemson makes the playoff, they win the ACC, and they're back in the mix. You look at Kevin Jennings last year at SMU, some of the magic that he was able to pull off from time to time, some of the great performances he had from time to time. That was a big reason why SMU was right there in the ACC championship game. And then you look at Miller Moss now at Louisville, assuming he can kind of get back to early form. Last year, early in the season at SC, played really well. as the season went along, he didn't play so well and got replaced, but we've seen him play at a high level in the past. So you look at the ACC quarterback list, Haynes King, I didn't even mention him. When Haynes King's healthy, then Georgia Tech's a real problem. So I think in the ACC, you have to have high-level quarterback play if you're going to compete at the top of the league. If Kyron Drones can get there, then Virginia Tech has a real chance. But the big thing, beyond just individual quarterback play, Virginia Tech has to learn how to win close games. I mean, that's the key. This has been an issue now for what feels like forever. Now, if you look at what the guy that everyone points to as far as losing close games, and no one never thought anyone could have a worse record in close games than Scott Frost in his time at Nebraska. In Scott Frost's time at Nebraska, he was 5-22 in one-score games. It didn't think you could get much worse than that. And look, it just happens. That's a 19% winning percentage. 18.5, but it rounds up. So 5-22, not good, right? Not what you're looking for. Well, let me raise you one more. Brent Pry in his time at Virginia Tech is 1-11 in a one-score game right now. So that's not what you need. And Brent Pry, look, is it a reflection on coaching? Sometimes. Is it a reflection on the fact that, hey, at least you're in the game, you're not getting blown out? Yeah, those are all positives. Now it's about making the key play down the stretch to give your team an edge and hopefully secure victory. Look, 1-11, it's a tough thing to wrap your head around. These things also do have a tendency of kind of overcorrecting the following year. But it's been now a couple years. So Virginia Tech's got to learn how to close. They've got to learn how to finish. They got to learn how to make the massive play and not the massive mistake. Because in those one-score games, it's one play here or there that could flip it in your favor. They got to learn how to start doing that. So, and they've had a bunch of close calls. I mean, the Syracuse game last year is a good example. I mean, big lead there in the third quarter. You're up by 3 scores. You lose the game in overtime, 38-31. So there's a bunch in which you kind of point to and say, man, they got to get this thing flipped, because the only time I can remember them winning a close game in the last handful of years was back against Liberty in 2022. I believe that was Brent Pry's first season. So all things considered, super optimistic about Virginia Tech. Will always be optimistic about Virginia Tech. But quarterback play and winning close games, those are the two things that could get them over the hump.
Man, look at you throwing out stats. 1-11 in one-score games. That's not good. All right. You mentioned Georgia Tech. We're going to stay in the ACC. This one comes from Steve in Atlanta. Georgia Tech has won more than 7 games in a season in 8 years. Can they get over that hump this year?
Well, I think this is the year for Georgia Tech. If they're going to make a move, if they're going to actually really assert themselves as a legitimate contender in the ACC, this feels like it's the best opportunity. We already know who the top dogs are in the conference. We've referenced them multiple times. It's Clemson 1, Miami 2, and however you kind of see it beyond that, whether it's Louisville, SMU, what have you. Georgia Tech should at least be in the mix for 3rd, 4th, at worst 5th in the ACC this year. Few reasons why I'm super bullish on them. Number one, their offensive consistency and just how explosive they are. They have so many guys on their roster that can become a humongous problem because they have game-breaking speed. It's almost like when they took over and this staff took over, their whole goal, Brent Key, his offensive coordinator, their mind was like, we got to find speed and we got to be tough as nails. If we're fast on the perimeter and tough as nails on the interior, we have a real chance. And this has kind of started to play out with a lot of great performances over the last couple of years. But Buster Faulkner, their offensive coordinator, does an incredible job. And this offense has shown signs of being an unstoppable unit from time to time. Now, if you look at what they were in the last 4 games of the 24 season, they averaged over 33 points a game. That's cooking with gas. They have had occasional issues with Haynes King staying healthy, and that's going to be of the utmost importance here heading into the season, because I just don't think their offense has any chance of being able to outscore you unless Haynes King is there pulling the trigger at the quarterback spot. So he's got to be healthy. But you look at some of the personnel. You have an outstanding and underrated running back in Jamal Haynes at Georgia Tech, a guy that not enough people talk about, but he can break the game open. You got really talented wide receivers. Yes, you lost Eric Singleton to Auburn, but you should feel real confident about what's back with Malik Rutherford and the addition of Eric Rivers from FIU, who had over 1,100 yards last year. So I think the offense still has great personnel around Haynes King, but man, it's really Haynes King that has to be that guy. I mean, he is a game breaker with tremendous speed. He's shown over the course of the last 2 seasons to become more accurate. I do think that his decision-making was better last year. I think it will continue to get better this year. Guy's going to take some chances. He's going to take some risks with the football. He's got to make sure he continues to make great decisions, but he can be one of the top players in the ACC at the position. And if he is, then Georgia Tech has a real chance to be a major, major problem. And then finally, they got to be better at turning people over defensively. If you look at their personnel along the defense, they're not going to be as talented across the board as a Miami. They're not going to be as talented as a Clemson. But what they can do is they can be a team that forces the opposition into making mistakes. And if they are opportunistic defensively, then you have a chance to beat every single team on your roster, even if there is a slight gap in the talent that one team might have against the other. If you look at Blake Gideon, their new defensive coordinator, he comes over from Texas. He's never called plays before, but this was a defense last year that struggled to generate a lot of pressure. They had just 18 sacks last year. They have to up that number significantly if they're going to improve and force opposing quarterbacks to throw into traffic. If they can do that, that'd be huge. They had 49 takeaways in 2 years in 22 and 23. They were turning people over like crazy. Well, last year they turned people over just 11 times. If they can increase turnovers, increase the pressure that they have put on the opposing quarterback, that could be massive. So I think those are the things, those are the keys for Georgia Tech to make a move this year. Continued explosiveness offensively, Haynes King always being available and continuing to make great decisions, and then defensively becoming a little more opportunistic, generating pressure on the quarterback and forcing some mistakes by him throwing into traffic to up that number of 11 turnovers from a year ago.
All right, next question. And I like this one. Very simple. Mike from Rochester. What are the best and worst case scenarios for the Florida Gators this season?
Okay, well, should we start with worst or should we start with best? Because I like to finish on a positive note.
Then worst.
Let's start with worst, and then we'll finish with best. All right, the worst case scenario is that DJ Lagway, who had off-season shoulder injury, who has been limited throughout spring, is on a pitch count currently. The worst case scenario is that he's not at 100%. The worst case scenario is that he's not available every single week throughout the season. If those things don't happen, that's a huge problem. All right. I don't think this team can overcome an injury at quarterback like they were able to overcome last year. Graham Mertz got hurt. DJ Lagway went right in, and they finished with a bang. They had great momentum going into the offseason as a result of the play that DJ Lagway provided. That's number one. Number two, the brutal schedule eventually takes its toll. Last year, it didn't. They got stronger as the season went along and started to win some of those games down the stretch that you thought they might be out of gas in. That's something that I think is massive. But this year, they have one of the hardest schedules in college football. All right, not only do you have to play an SEC schedule that includes 8 games against quality teams like Georgia, you're playing LSU, you play against Tennessee, you play against Texas, you have a brutal schedule. And by season's end, it might start to take its toll. And if the roster isn't prepared for the grind that this season and the schedule could provide, that could be a huge problem. I think the other thing is look, losing close is one thing, getting blown out is another. Think about last year, the game against Tennessee didn't feel nearly as damaging as the game against Miami in week 1. The game in week 1 got sideways. Miami blew them out. The game against Tennessee, you were kind of left with some optimism. Went on the road, competed against one of the best teams in the country. And yeah, you lose a close game, but you felt like the pieces were starting to come together. So I think getting blown out is another thing that would potentially be the worst case scenario. So I think also too, you get off to a poor start. You're looking at your schedule. You're 3-3, you're 2-4, whatever it may be, depending on how it all shakes out. Then you could kind of create some dissatisfaction amongst the fans. They all of a sudden start to boo. Like, that's the worst case scenario. But I don't think that's likely. Like, the best case scenario is far more likely for the Florida Gators this year. So let's kind of highlight what the best case scenario would be. Number one, you carry over tremendous momentum from last year. that momentum carries over. They were 8-5 last year, including winning 4 straight to close out the season. You had some massive wins, like against Ole Miss. That win kept the Ole Miss Rebels out of the playoff, and they kind of finished with a bang. So they just continue to pick up right where they left off at season's end. That's number one. Number two, DJ Lagway blossoms, recovers completely from his offseason injury, doesn't skip a beat from where he was down the stretch, and becomes an even more capable player with his arm, with his legs, with just elevating everyone else around him. Because if you watch, he provided a spark last year in so many ways. Now, while the numbers aren't going to necessarily jump off the page, you just watch it how the other guys played when he was on the field. There was a sense of belief. If he can develop into a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback, then the sky's the limit for what Florida could potentially become this year. If he breaks out, has a Heisman Trophy type season, becomes one of the top quarterbacks in the SEC, that could be massive. Number three, the offensive line becomes a dominant unit. I mean, just dominant across the board. A lot of veterans back along the offensive line, a lot of continuity that's been created. You have a dynamic 1-2 punch, 3 punch at running back. Jaden Bobb becomes one of the best backs in the SEC. He's extremely powerful, one-cut runner, can run through contact pretty easily. If he can do that and the offensive line gels, they'll be massive. And then the defense, man, Ron Roberts goes in, defensive coordinator. Yes, there's a few new faces that might be along the defensive line, but you have some carryover from last year, like Caleb Banks, a defensive tackle, that could become an All-American this year if he can play for 12 games the way he played in the final 3 or 4. If he can do that, you're in great shape. And if the defense can improve from a takeaway standpoint, that would be big as well. They also, I think, need to win some big games, right? They're going to have a few games where they might be an underdog. You go on the road to LSU, might be an underdog there early in the season. You host Texas, might be an underdog there against a team that everyone thinks is one of the best in college football. You get a neutral site game against Georgia, might be an underdog in that game. You win some of those upsets, and then you can parlay some of those victories, complement those with a win against Miami, a win against Florida State at the end of the season, and you might be in a really good spot. So I think those are kind of the best case scenarios for Florida this year. And I'm telling you, man, I think they're going to be a problem. I think Florida's going to be really, really solid. They're kind of flying under the radar. The schedule's brutal, but I do think they have the personnel to weather the storm, so that they're still very much in the mix when we get to the end of the season. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Really appreciate the support that you all have shown the show over the last few years, but especially this offseason. The numbers have been just off the charts good. We always greatly appreciate the support that you've shown us. Follow us on our social media channels, Always CFB on both Instagram and on Twitter/X. You can also follow me at Greg McElroy on my Twitter account as well. Continue to subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get the podcast, because that way, whenever we put out an episode, it'll automatically be in your feed. It'll download and you can listen to both episodes that we put out every single week. And if you're here with us via the ESPN College Football YouTube channel, subscribe there and you'll get not just the whole episode, but you'll get some of the clip outs that we put together throughout the course of the week as well. So for all of us here at Always College Football, we greatly appreciate you. For Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.